Hello. Good morning, Colin.
Happy to be here.
Great. Let's start off with your book. Like I said, I just got it off Amazon last night, downloaded it to my phone. And I'm, cherry picking chapters. But tell us why you wrote the book, and share with us some of the chapters in there. Well, I got a couple of favorites already though, but I'll let you start with why you wrote the book.
So, I write in my books and on my YouTube channel. I document two things. On one hand, I document black on white crime, black mob violence, black criminality, and how it's wildly out of proportion. And on the other hand, I document how reporters and public officials ignore, deny, condone, excuse, and even encourage it. So I wrote the book because I wrote the book really to fight what I call the greatest lie of our generation, the myth of black victimization. Because every time, we pick up a newspaper or watch the TV, especially in the last 2 years, all we hear about is that black people are relentless victims of relentless white racism all the time, everywhere. That explains everything, especially why cops are always picking on black people for no reason whatsoever. And, one of the things I have the most material on, most videos on, is what you were just talking about, black violence and mayhem in schools, directed at teachers, directed at students, directed at staff, directed at cops, directed at neighbors. There's an enormous amount of chaos and violence and mayhem in black schools among black students. And when I don't really like throwing numbers around, because numbers to me are usually just a deflection. But I mean, let's say in the Philadelphia schools, you get 60% dropout rates, and the people who are left are reading at a third grade level. This is when they graduate. So the picture is pretty dismal out there. Oh, here, I have a question for you.
Sure.
So you're talking about generational wealth. I was really happy to hear that. Do you think poverty causes crime, or does crime cause poverty?
Boy, what came first, the chicken or the egg?
I understand that, people that are poor do desperate things, but I also know that people who lead these lifestyles, marginal lifestyles, that's not going to help them increase their wealth, just the opposite.
And to answer your question, the best way I can answer it, I don't think poverty does. All right, I think the lack of knowledge or the lack of education in a person who doesn't have some type of moral compass, that can lead to crime. There are plenty of poor people that don't go around terrorizing people. And one of the things we talk about on this program quite often is social capital, basically being nice to other people. So if you have, let's say you don't have any money or what have you, or material trappings or what have you, if a person, in my opinion, and observation experiences, if you are respectful and nice to other people, that can open up the doors to prosperity, whatever you define prosperity to be. Could be good health, it could be good relationships, because everything comes from everybody else. But if some people, but I don't put it on poverty now. You're talking about the social capital of being nice to everybody. Okay, that's good. It's nice, but I tell you, it seems like people forget one thing. Like, you need some skills. Get some skills. Get a job. Don't wait around for some magical thing called a job. Yeah, I agree with you. But you do need skills. You do need skills, in my opinion, across the board in the United States. Yeah, if you have there's opportunity for everybody, but a lot of people, including white folks. I'm from this school. Okay, I go back 300-400 years. I believe that everybody should learn how to build a house without bank financing the way the Amish do it today and the way the normal person did it, the average person did it 300-400 years ago. But you're right. Your skill could be writing, talking, whatever. But like I said, I was in the school system, and to tell the truth, a lot of these people have social workers and need social workers. Anyway, my whole thing is I got out of the school system because one of the things I had to park at one particular school. I had to park my car about 2 or 3 blocks away from the school and walk in. And then during lunch breaks, I would go out and switch to another position. Now, here's why I did this. Teachers from time to time that park in the school parking lot, and this is a black school in Washington, D.C., but it could be in any urban area, that if you gave them a bad grade or report card or whatever, you might come out there and your cause to face them, basically, and you can know who did it. But it was nothing, basically, that you could do. You're not going to get any backup from the administration of downtown. And if a student happens to hit you, I never experienced that, but there were some female teachers that were hit. You're basically hurt. So I can really relate to the fellow of that book. Don't make the black kids angry, because in many cases, maybe not in all, but too many, you have no backup. Matter of fact, I would tell anybody thinking about teaching in an urban setting now, or a public school setting, because private schools are a whole different kettle of fish. But in a public school setting in the urban neighborhood, I would suggest go to law school or get at least a paralegal degree and know your rights before you go up in there. But going back to the poverty thing, you're right. You do need skills, and the opportunities are there.
Let me ask you another question.
A lot of people don't take advantage of it.
Let me ask you another question. So do you ever see the people you used to teach with?
I have run across years ago. I've changed my setting from city to rural, but I ran across a few of them in the past, yes.
How many of them look like they're shell-shocked? They have PTSD. I swear, when you talk about cops and in Washington, D.C., when you talk about cops and bus drivers and teachers, you're talking about people, a large number of whom have some kind of symptoms of PTSD. They look shell-shocked.
I wouldn't put it, in my experience, they look that way, but I will agree with you that a lot of people, and let me make the distinction here, because you have a number of African Americans who say they have this post-traumatic slave syndrome. I don't buy that. But there are many who live in negative situations or environments or comfort zones where they just don't know how to deal with negative comfort zones and how to reframe things and make everything positive.
Yeah, and you know what? And for every one person who figures out how to deal with them, or they have to get out of there to save their own life, they left 10 or 20 people behind who are just every day or in hostile environments, threatening environments, environments where you thought you were going to be doing good things, and all of a sudden you're just in there trying to save your own life. And that's what I see on video after video. That's what I see. I mean, I got 2 letters from teachers. I get letters from teachers and cops and bus drivers all day long. Got 2 yesterday, both saying, listen, I taught there for 2 years, 8 years, 10 years, and it's worse than anybody knows, and the effect on the teachers is worse than anybody knows. Oh, by the way, here's what you tell me if this rings true. I hear a lot from teachers. I've seen a lot of this on video where the teacher is assaulted. The teacher goes down to the principal, and the principal says, "That's your fault. You lost control of your class."
Oh, I heard that all the time. I heard it all the time and saw it all the time.
So get that kid out of the school. Arrest him. No, it's your fault. I mean, that is kind of a microcosm for the other stuff going on around the country.
But that's what I meant. The teachers, that's why I played that audio to start up this podcast. The teachers essentially in these urban schools, I've been an eyewitness of it when I was working there. They don't get any backup from the principal's office. I've seen principals and vice principals cursed out. Now, this was back in the early 80s when I was in it. I got out about 84, 85 at the latest, and I only went in like in 82 because I was working another job. Matter of fact, teaching school was the great motivator for me to start my own business. But no, you don't get me back up. And at that time, I started making $40. I went in at $40 a day, and when I got out, it was $50. Now I don't know. I understand they get $90 or $100 a day now, but no, the combat pay, because it takes typically maybe, depending on the school, not all the public schools are bad, but it might take a 40-minute class. It might take 15, 20 minutes to get the class settled, provided you don't have somebody in there trying to beat you down. So anyway, my whole thing is I got out of that whole thing, and
here's what else I hear from
teachers.
Because
I'm not cut out for that.
Here's what I hear from white teachers in black schools. The parents. So if you the parents who are naive enough to call the home of a black child, they will hear one of two things. Why are you expletive deleted calling me? It's your problem. Or two, it's your fault because you're racist against my child. This is what every white teacher in a black school tells me.
Yeah, well, I just did a podcast last week, excuse 2 minutes. Now, I'm not saying all African Americans, when people listen to this podcast, I'm black, okay? But like I said, I think a downfall of a lot of African Americans, and you got people like every color of the rainbow that has this excuse side is known. But it's in my opinion, it's just too many of us that have blame the white folks on everything, or blame and have an excuse for everything. And when you do that, you're self-sabotaging yourself.
And when you're in business, you know this from business, nobody really wants to hear your excuse. It's like, I hired you to do a job, so please do it, and don't bother me with the details. Just get it done. There's
exactly.
Excuses in the real world.
Exactly. And everybody's been shit on. I've said that a few times on this program. Everybody has been shit on. So, matter of fact, it's a book I recommended on here to people from time to time. It's called The Magic of Thinking Big by David Schwartz. And chapter 2 or 3 of that book, he's got a chapter titled Excuse-itis, the failure disease. Because everybody gets shit on, everybody has a bad day, everybody has something negative goes in their lives. Essentially, you can't make excuses. You got to take those lemons and turn them into lemonade. Now, that's my philosophy.
There's something, I don't know what it is, but there's something, especially at first, if you make an excuse, if you turn yourself into a victim, for some reason that's kind of a warm feeling. I don't know why, it just is. But if you say to yourself, I'm going to be 100% responsible for my own behavior and situation in life, that's kind of a tough nut to crack. But the second feeling is, hey, now that I'm responsible, I can change.
Yeah, but through some of these government programs in urban areas, entitlement programs, some people have been addicted to using excuses, using excuses and blame. I can't get decent housing, so they get a Section 8 certificate. I can't get, they have, let me put it to the social services office. Most people that are in the social services office are basically socially bankrupt. They don't know how to be nice to other people. They burnt bridges down with even their parents or their mother. They can't even sleep on mama's couch with their children. They have little or no social capital. Thus, there's the social services office. And that welfare check, that Section 8 certificate, that WIC, whatever, that's where they're at. Because the excuses they have got them those, what you call trappings, but it's enslaved them. But, of course, they don't see it that way.
All the things that you're talking about, all the excuses, or whatever, it's kind of, when you talk about crime and black criminality and how it's way out of proportion, everything you just talked about is blown up 1,000 times. We see the excuses. We see the victimization. We see the blame shifting. And, you know, it's just been catastrophic what's going on in this country right now. I mean, I was watching, and so I don't really do the whole cause and solution thing. I just kind of document what's going on. But I can tell you that the level of racial hostility, black on white, is now mainstream. I was watching ESPN the other day, and Isaiah Thomas was on there. And he was talking about whatever his kumbaya moment was. But then he started talking to Max Kellerman about white kids can go into black neighborhoods where he grew up in Detroit, I think, or I forget where he grew up. And he goes, yeah, you'll get robbed, but you won't get beat up. And everybody in the audience, and Isaiah Thomas pointed out that everybody in the audience was black, and they put the camera on him. Everybody thought that was the funniest thing. It was so funny, he repeated it. So a white kid in the black neighborhood will get robbed, but he won't be beaten up. And this kind of racial animosity, hostility, you turn on MSNBC, CBS, NBC, it's like right there. It's like white people are racist, and they're always picking on black people for no reason whatsoever, especially cops. And, man, for a young person of any race starting out, accumulate some wealth or get a job, I cannot think of a more corrosive mindset to have that's going to stop you from being a success.
No, I agree. You can see that in two cities off the top of my head. They both went bankrupt. Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, and Detroit, Michigan, where you have that excuse-itis disease is rampant. And, you know, social services in all the ways it's morphed out is very expensive on a municipality. So what will happen next? Well, it's happening already. You know, those places will get are being gentrified.
Hey, can we talk about Detroit?
Anybody can gentrify. You know what I'm saying?
I'm sorry. Yeah, can we talk about Detroit for a minute?
Sure.
So 2 years ago, Detroit got a new police chief. And this was a guy that, you know, the gun rights people would call him a gun grabber. You know, like a lot of police chiefs are. Sheriffs aren't, but the police chiefs are. So he gets a new job, chief of Detroit. He's in there for 2 months. He goes on TV and says, people of Detroit, get a gun. We can't protect you. The city's too dangerous. And all of a sudden, people start getting guns. And in the next 6 months, there were 10 or 20 people that were killed during a home invasion robbery. And, you know, it's weird, but the crime numbers in Detroit are plummeting. The cops are like, no, we're not down with the excuses anymore. We're down with the victims. We're down with the people who want to make something out of their own lives. So if you come in here and try to tell me there's a reason why you or your son committed this horrific violence, you know, a lot of times now they're saying, no, we're not playing that anymore.
Right.
So there's a light, however small, is shining in Detroit.
Yeah, I had my own Detroit for many years because I like to invest in real estate, but like I said, I've gone rural. I'd rather stay outside of the grid, so to speak. Let's before we go to lunch, because you got some people that want to talk to you. Your book, Don't Make the Black Kids Angry. Could you give us just an overall synopsis of that book?
Yeah, so this book is one example after another of scale black violence and maybe smaller scale, but it's and also how reporters and public officials ignore, deny, condone, excuse it. For example, the opening chapter comes from Virginia Beach, Virginia. 2 years ago, 40,000 black people rampaged through Virginia Beach, Virginia, mostly college students from black colleges. They just tore the town apart, and I kind of documented that. Then I documented how the newspapers and the business owners there were just afraid to death to let anybody know something really bad just happened to their town. And so we go stories one after another all over the country. Yeah, we don't do solutions. I don't do apologies. I just say, listen, there's something really, really wrong and bad happening in this country, And the worst part about it is the number of people that we trust to tell us the truth are not telling us the truth about it.
True. Matter of fact, the lady that turned me on to you, Heidi Peterson. Matter of fact, she actually helped me launch the show about 3 years ago, before we even got online, out of a station out of Detroit. Heidi Peterson, white woman, she was in Russia for 3 months, 6 months, what have you. Came back. She bought a home in Detroit, though, and, locked it up. And then when she came back, there was somebody squatting in the house. Now, here's what I'm going to give you an example of excusing. Squatting in a lot of your urban cities in the United States, which is really trespassing. It's criminal trespassing. At the very least, that is excused to a very high degree on a local level. Now, a lot of people don't know how to combat it because they don't have a basic legal literacy. That's another podcast. But some of these people are squat, and then when the owner of the property tries to get them out, they'll call code enforcement, and then code enforcement at that point really is in cahoots with the squatter, because through code enforcement, the code enforcement officer will levy you fines or if you don't get these repairs done quickly enough, and then oftentimes the property owner loses the house. Heidi eventually had to sell her place in Detroit, but that's an example of a white person, and I know her offline now, who essentially her story made the news, and the squatter went on camera with one of the local news stations, and the story went viral, and she was never arrested. Criminal trespassing, straight up, along with other things, other crimes, but on a municipal level, and that destroys any chance of generational wealth if you stay in that situation. That's why I've gone rural. Anyway, we got a caller here at area code 843. Your mic is open.
Yes, good day all. How's everybody?
Fine.
My comment, what I really would like to say is, energy without focus can be dangerous. Not knowing the truth, but knowing that something is wrong is a problem within itself. There's a lot of things that's going on in this country, even vibratorily, that is causing some of these small situations to happen. There's the dark act going on. There's toxins in the food, GMOs. There's a lot of things. You got these cell phone towers that causes things. Melanated people are susceptible to a lot of things just because of their physical makeup. I'm not justifying the way these children are acting. And on the other side of the coin, there are children who are creating things at 9 and 11 years old. So my point is this. If they change the systems of education and if they change the laws to benefit people, everybody is coming into this country and capitalizing on the Aboriginal people of this country, and these people in this country don't realize that they're Aboriginal people, there's always going to be a problem. That's all I wanted to say.
Okay. Colin, any response to this?
I like talking in, real specifics, like something happened yesterday in that city, in that place, and this is what happened. This is how people responded to it. So that, whatever that meant, I'm not even sure. But
let me explain this to you. Am I still on?
Yeah, you're still on.
Well, let me put it to you like this then. Just like the physical body, if there is a challenge or a dis-ease in a certain part of the body, you have to go above that organ to find out what's going on with that organ in order to fix the organ that is the one that's given the most aggravation, say. Right? The education system in this country has been the same since, just like the gentleman said, since the 80s or 70s, really before that. You know, you could go to some of these schools and you could pick up the books, and the information in there is basically the same. You know,
I
from the 60s
I
and
want
the
to know
70s.
who thought it was a good idea to put hundreds and thousands of teenagers in the same place at the same time. No, that's not a good idea.
The elites, exactly. It's the elites. You know, if you think about it, just like, for example, if you go to a martial arts school, right, you'll see maybe 15, 20 children and one instructor. But the thing is they're orderly, all right? They have a certain amount of exercise before they start doing their trainings. And sometimes the parents are involved. See, there's so many things in our society right now. Everything is microwave, so there's always going to be a problem. Children don't even understand what their requirements are, and that's why, say, for example, Asian and Indian children, the ones that are doing those spelling challenges and things of that nature. Look how much studying they're doing. Look how their parents initiate them and give them clarity and understanding. If I was injured as a child, one thing I'm going to do is I'm not going to beat my child the way I was beat, or I might do it unconsciously. You see what I'm saying? But the fact still remains. Either I'm hiding from facing my past, or I'm gun-ho about it, one or the other. There is really no median right now. You know, just like what Claude Anderson says. You know, we got to buy politicians. We got to do all of these things. It's crazy. It really is. And another thing, maybe if most of the teachers in those schools were the same color as those children in those schools, maybe that would change. If they would hire more male teachers.
Wish it was that. The audio that I played, our host can tell you what a good idea that is.
Well, the audio I played at the beginning of the podcast, out of Chicago. Okay, and I got that off YouTube. That, if you saw the video of it, and it's on YouTube, just put in Chicago teacher terrorized by students or something like that. Just pick on keywords. It was a black female teacher being terrorized.
I've got that on my YouTube channel
by black students, and that's not an isolated incident. I'm 6'8", and it's, you know, a teacher cannot put a pinky on them. You can't even speak to these kids a certain way. So now the way I'm looking at it, just from one person's perspective, home training. Okay.
Yeah.
Because not all black households are this way. I mean, because you got wild white folks too. You got wild everybody. Mm-hmm. But it all comes back to home training, and that's a whole nother podcast in itself. So I'm an advocate of homeschooling. Okay, but a lot of people, because we have different situations, their lives might not be conducive to home. So you can get involved with the PT and try to tackle that way, and it might work, and it does work for some. The homeschool method might work for some, but for others, they might not be aware on how to arrange for their children to get the best education. But a lot of these teachers come into class to teach. They're paid to teach. They're not paid to be social workers. They're not paid to be police officers. So they got to do, that's 3 hats they're wearing, and they're only getting paid for one, and I'll use myself when I was in the system. I am not a social worker. I do not want to be a social worker. Now, I'll be your friend out of that situation, and I'll listen, but I can't be a social worker and listen to 20 people per classroom or 30 people per classroom, and you got, 4, 5, 6 of those classes a day. And then you got, the risk of getting hurt. Yeah, sure.
Okay. Do you agree that the children that are being born today more intelligent?
Never thought about
a lot
that.
of the
I
children
think we're
that
all
I
born. I think, all right, people being born today have more access to information. What they do with that information and what type of information they're receiving, that's another kettle of fish.
Right, and that's my point. And the education system of today is almost prehistoric. That's partly my point.
So
you
the
can have
mainstream,
homeschooling.
yeah, the main,
you can
yeah,
have satellite.
the public school system is historic.
And that's a major part of the challenge. Yes, you're right. The parents are basically striving to live their own lives, and they need to be more accountable. That's true. I have a brother who used to be an educator also, and he had a challenge with 3 children, and he sent them home. And out of those 3 children, only one parent came to school when that child came back from suspension. So what happened was he wound up sending those children back home. He didn't get a response from that child or that parent for a week. He sent a letter there. He didn't get a response for 3 days, and then he had the principal call there, and then he sent a letter there saying, if you don't come to school with your child in 3 days, we're going to call Child Protective Services. The parent came, and they were black. The parent came in, and she had an attitude. She was very well dressed. He said she wasn't very educated, but it was evident that she was basically living her life. And she said she don't have time to come here and deal with these situations with her child that they are supposed to be responsible for. Just like you're saying, it's daycare. But overall, if you challenge the child with new information, that child will change. And for those that don't, then I don't know. Maybe you need to put them in training school for construction or whatever. But
well, let me ask
you need to make the
now.
parents more accountable, and you need to go ahead.
Yeah, I'll ask Colin and you, anybody listening to this question. What is the cutoff point as far as age? Because by the time somebody's in middle school, 14, 15, a lot of them are just set in their ways. Not that you can't change and adapt at any age, but from observation, it's easier, to get them straight. And this is what the parents do. When you bring them home from the hospital, the parents are setting the tone. So
right.
The teachers don't set that tone. Now, there might be a gifted teacher that can, influence somebody or what have you. But and there are some teachers like that. I know I wasn't one of them. And in our day and age, where I see it, the new school, to a high degree, is the Internet. I can get online and listen to Colin Flaherty. I can go on YouTube, get a bunch of his videos, pick up information from his books. I can talk to people like you. You got Peter on here. So, I mean, that's the way I'm getting I'm reinventing myself basically by educating myself through online. But, hold on, let's go back to this victim thing. Okay. One of the things I've noticed is you have a lot of younger African Americans, 19, 20, 21, not even 25, that they've got a very severe, in my opinion, not all of them, but too many for my taste, a very severe victim mindset, and they are being enabled by various government agencies, politicians when they run for office. This is another reason why I wanted to have Colin on the program, because I think the full title of the book that I'm reading now by him, Don't Make Black Kids Angry, The Hoax of Black Victimization and Its Enablers. Am I correct, Colin?
Yep.
Right. It still goes back to the same thing.
Yeah. See, I know you don't have excuse-itis. Okay. You're not a victim. Okay. This podcast I'm trying to wake somebody up so they can get out of victim mode. But anyway, getting back to Colin, I forgot where we left off at, but getting back to your book,
let me ask you a question.
You can talk about all your books.
Let me ask our host a question.
Sure.
You notice how antiseptic this conversation is? It's like, well, we got to do. No, I mean, the reality that black children in black schools are in is so chaotic and full of violence and anti-intellectualism that, there's nothing antiseptic about it. And nobody's getting any skills. Nobody's getting any training. People are being hurt. But the school principals, they're talking about suspending people, right? Well, since Obama got in there, the rule now is we don't suspend people because suspending people causes crime. So let's keep them in school, and that will magically transform their lives. But what really happens is, the word is out, do whatever you want. There are no consequences. It is a catastrophe out there. I hear this and see this every day.
But still, I feel
you were talking about that video.
I feel it's still all by design. That's all I wanted to say.
Say that again.
I feel it's all by design.
Well, you know what it could be. I'm not a mind reader, so I don't know. And that to me is when people say it's all by design, I say that's a deflection. I say right now we're dealing with people who are denying the reality that exists out there. The catastrophe is enormous.
Yeah, I'm back. My call, as it does on occasion, dropped off block. So we're about to go to an additional call here. But let me go by the design, comment on the design thing. I'm a big believer of you design your own life. That's where I'm at with it. If a person there are talk shows on reparations. I'm from the school of thought, get your own reparations, because it's easy to buy land out here. That's why I occasionally play the audio on William Bill Powell during the Jim Crow era when he was turned away from white golf courses, when he was turned down for a bank loan. He got some social capital together from some of his golfing students, black man, and he bought a 78-acre dairy farm, converted it into a golf course, he and his wife, and now it's second generation Clearview Golf Course. So I believe you design your own life. That's what the design. That's the way I'm looking at it. We have another caller here at 320. You're on with Colin Flaherty and the rest of our guests.
And good morning, everyone. 843 has a very clever spin on the victim mindset. It's all the fault of the educational system. And the educational system is at fault by design. Well, you can argue the educational system is at fault by design or by blundering accident, and it doesn't matter. It goes right back to the victim game. We're victims of the educational establishment. I'm a solution-oriented guy, and there are numerous blacks across the United States who've figured out the solution. And the solution is you abandon the educational system. It's broken. It doesn't work. The black community came out for, charter schools. And Hillary came out for charter schools. And the teachers union sat Hillary down and said, listen up, honey. Charter schools are bad for us. We don't give a shit about these black kids. We give a shit about us. And all of a sudden, Hillary's opposed to charter schools. All you have to do is follow the money. The L.A., what's the name of that woman in Chicago who put together the private school with the waiting list that the government ultimately shut?
The late Marva Collins, who eventually she had to shut that school down. That was Marva Collins.
They had to shut it down because the government of the state of Illinois shut it down. That's how much the government cares about black people. Marva Collins had kids at age 12 reading Chaucer. There was a conga line of her graduates who went to college. There was a waiting list to get into her school. And if you made one mistake, one uniform error, one attendance error, one discipline or conduct error, you were gone. Adios. Next. And the penalty Marva Collins paid for constructing an educational element that worked in the black community was they shut her down. And I got a clue for you. I lived in Chicago. I was born and raised in Chicago. And the black community didn't do shit for Marva Collins, because a lot of them had their hand in the cookie jar. And that's bad for business when you realize what the problem is and you strike out on your own. So you can do one of two things. You can sit next to 843 by his telephone and you can do the victim game. It's the educational establishment. Or you can stand up and walk out of the building and create a parallel universe that works. And I advocate creating parallel universes that work. L.A.?
Thank you. Going back to Colin. Colin, you've written some other books. Could you share those with us as well?
Yeah, I wrote a book called White Girl Bleed a Lot. It's basically the same kind of book. It documents violence and denial all over the country. And it's from violence from black people, denial from reporters and public officials. And I think one of the benefits of focusing on this whole idea of black violence and crime and how it's wildly out of proportion is everything we're talking about in schools, it's all multiplied 1 billion times. And so really we see the effects of all this racial consciousness. We see, and anyway, that's why I wrote the books, because I just didn't think enough people were, right now we're getting the opposite story. Not that black crime is wildly out of proportion. The opposite story is that people are the one committing the crime on black people, and it's kind of bizarre out there.
Give us your YouTube channel also.
I tell you what, my YouTube channel is blowing up right now. It's easy to find, Colin Flaherty 712. You were talking about that one woman. I could picture that in my mind. I mean, I know exactly the video you're talking about. We have hundreds and hundreds of those videos on my YouTube, on my school, on one of my playlists on YouTube. All the violence in schools against teachers, against black teachers, against white teachers. I mean, I'm just telling you, it's chaos and mayhem, and nobody's learning. And it's just astonishing how many people are trying to pretend there's something good happening.
Right. And now going back to the by design thing, if 843 or anybody, if you don't participate in the system, in other words, if people don't go to the PTA meetings, if people don't go to the neighborhood planning meetings, then what happens. That's the design of it, the way I see it.
LA,
if you want to say, yeah, go ahead, Colin.
I understand there's a huge macro picture here. Okay, let's fix the schools. Okay, but if you're a parent on a micro level, if you're a parent with a child, that's not your problem at the moment. Your problem is, what are you going to do today with your child? Are you going to send them into that school, or are you going to find another way? Whatever I don't care if that's homeschooling, I don't care if that's moving, I don't care. But sending your child into a school where there is no learning, that's just violence and chaos, that's not an option for anybody. And anybody who thinks that it is basically guilty of child abuse.
That's another podcast.
Yeah, but he's definitely right. He's definitely right. And that's why I did speak on responsibility of the parents. There are a lot of parents that would rather drive
listen,
a new
there
car.
are no parents, okay? There are no parents. Let's take that off the table, all right? That's not a viable option. So I don't even know what the option is. But to say that the parents are going to come out of the sky and fix this thing, no, the parents are part of the problem. They're not the solution.
No, that's my point. That's my point. That's why I spoke on accountability. Just like what you said, what the gentleman, the host said about the PTA meetings and things of that nature. I clarified that with a friend of mine who was a teacher, and two of the children stayed home for 3 weeks on a 1-week suspension. And when one of the parents did come in, she was going off because of the fact that it was disrupting her life to deal with her responsibility, which is to make sure her child is being open.
And here's the thing. So we've been screwing this thing up for 50 years. And I wish there was a magical switch that we could just turn and say, oh, good, that's done with. Let's elect this guy or that guy. We've screwed this up for 50 years. And right now, the state, the condition today is there's an enormous amount of black-on-white hostility, black-on-white excuse-making. The kids are learning at home, at school, in church, on TV, everywhere. And it's racial grievance now is a central organizing feature of a lot of people's lives. I see it when I get videos and accounts of black people involved in black and white violence. It's like, there was a horrific case. I forget the town just a couple of weeks ago. The guy and his buddies raped this white chick. I can't even tell you how the horrific details. But in the middle of it, this is on video. In the middle of it, he goes, "This is for 400 years of slavery, bitch." And this casual racial hostility is it's like a cancer in this country now. And it didn't happen overnight. We're not going to get rid of it overnight, but I don't know. I don't know if we are or not, ever.
Okay. Well, the media is making a lot of money on. We have another caller at 314. Your mic is open.
How you doing, L.A.?
Hey, good morning, Pianki.
I've been following the education of African American children in this country since 1970, Ocean Hill and Brownsville in New York, and spent a lot of time with programs ranging from New York to Chicago to Detroit and Los Angeles. What I see, public schools have been overall a failure, and you have had blacks that have wanted to get out of this system. A viable way would be choice, full choice, including vouchers. I've seen Detroit try to make changes where you had over 5,000 African Americans come out to meetings on the issue back in the 1990s. Kansas City had 500-600 people come out to the meetings back in the late 90s. But when African Americans are polled and asked what do they want in order to change their system, it's ignored, and many of them do say choice. You have vanguard organizations like the NAACP that say, no, you don't want choice because they're in the pockets of the NEA and AFT. And somebody may mention about the parents. They're absolutely right. It's not the parents' fault because the parents graduated from the system that's totally at fault now. Now, there are good public institutions in at the elementary level, but for the benefit that you get out of it, it's a lot of money being wasted. So give them parents' choice. And, we had an initiative here through a state representative where she wanted to have the ability for businesses to adopt families and pay for their choice, for their parent to send their child wherever they wanted to, and only have the ability to write that cost off against its gross income, its business income. And you had black representatives, and the Missouri NAACP was highly offensive to that, to the point where they threatened to call white outstate legislatures racist. So the disdain that lies between black and white goes deep in America, and it's not going to come out anytime soon. It's just going to be the way it is. And the blame can be put in one direction because of the things and the way things went about starting. And they can continue to be fostered today. So I just wanted to add that to it.
Well, let me chime in on this. I'm going to take right here in 2016, and these 2 models have been going on for a while. A public school system, and let's say a private school, any private school, and I came up mostly through private schools. Now, the private schools I came up in, there was no second chance. You get caught cheating on a test, you got a discipline problem, you're out of the school. There's no second chance, there's no third chance, there's no suspension, you're gone. All right? There's no crime of victim, there's no parents coming in. Everybody's told up front, if so-and-so acts this way, they're done. All right? Let's switch over to public schools where I used to teach. All right? And some school jurisdictions now, the student can't get suspended. They can beat up the teacher with basically a lot of these students in the public school system. It's not, put it this way, it grows back home. A lot of this violence comes right. I mean, behavior is learned. Behavior is learned to a high degree at home. So, like Colin mentioned, what is a parent to do in real time in 2016? Or a teacher, what are they to do in 2016? Well, I'm from the Peter School of Thought. Let's deal with a parallel universe. That's mild, but I don't have a kid in public school right now. But Colin, any comments on this, or any other books you have? Because you got the one I'm reading from last night. You have quite a few chapters in it, and one of the chapters is on teachers.
You were talking about they won't suspend students now. Well, the reason they don't suspend students is from the federal government now, from Obama on down, they see everything through the lens of race. So the Department of Education looked at the numbers and saw that black students were not performing as well as white students, and they're being disciplined more often than white students. But I just did a video documenting three cases of this 2 days ago, what I'm about to describe. And so if there's any disparity, there's only one reason for that disparity, and that is white racism. So that's why they're sending the edict down to school districts all over the country. Don't suspend the black students. They're very explicit about it. In Milwaukee, if you want to suspend a black student, you've got to send that request up to the superintendent of schools. She personally will review every request and basically turn them all down. And so everything's about white racism, and nothing's about responsibility. And I don't see how that works.
Well, that's not the reason they don't suspend the black student. They don't suspend the black student because if they're not sitting in their desk, that building doesn't get paid. That's the biggest reason.
No,
in Kansas City.
That's a fairy tale, not to support by fact.
All right, so you're looking at economics. For every student, the school gets so much money, right?
Every student that's counted at 11:30 in the morning, the school gets so much money.
Yeah,
if they're not, at least that is in St. Louis.
Listen, I understand that. But I also understand that they're very explicit about not suspending black students. Nobody's hiding this. Nobody's like whispering. They're saying it very explicitly. We're not going to suspend black students because they are victims of racism. And that's the way they're looking at it. So that these students get a free pass. The schools are turned into these crazy zones of violence and mayhem. And I don't see how it could get worse.
And, I agree with you. These silly notions of busing black children out into white districts where a child took not only the amount of money that they would have received if they had sat in the desk at their home school, but in some cases they took 2 and 3 times more. Here in the St. Louis area, it allowed white districts to build to the point where it was embarrassing, thus by relieving the white population from the burden of having to float bonds in order to pay for that building, to the point where they say, well, we've done, let's send them back where they came from. So it's a lot of blame that can go around in this scenario. I was totally against busing. I thought it was a silly notion. They came up with the same idea here just 2 years ago in the Normandie School District. A world-class building went on in that school district. And because of the antiquated methods that they used, they wasn't getting the academic results. And then again, like in Kansas City, Missouri, where you had a program that had been going on since the 90s, where those black schools, the elementary school, ranked in the top 6 in the academic performance in the state of Missouri. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 them in the academic performance. And what did they do? They end up closing the school because of the old adage, budgetary concerns.
That's that's a prime example of the entire system is wrong and screwed up and upside down. I'll give you the racist honky view of all of this. The racist honky view, as repeated to me by an old racist honky I knew, he said the problem is 80% of the urban black community has not adopted the dominant culture. Now, let's say it's 50%. Let's say it's 92%. Let's say it's whatever number you want to plug in. The solution remains the same. The blacks in the black community who see that this doesn't work, they see the damage it's doing, they see what's wrong with it all, they have one alternative, like our author guest this morning stated. You either stuff your kids in these warehouses of madness, or you create a parallel universe, and you put them in that universe. And it doesn't matter what the particular numbers are. This black lady comes to the school, her kid has a discipline problem, and she can't be bothered because it's interfering with her life. She has not adopted the dominant culture. And there's white folks all over that have not adopted the dominant culture. The jails and prisons are filled with them. The solution is somehow the people in these communities have to create an alternative universe and make it work. You know, I've said for 30 years, dismantle the Department of Education, close all the public schools, and sell the buildings back into the community in which they sit. And if you people had listened to me, that school in Kansas City would still be opened. And it would probably be number 5 or number 4. Because apparently people running that school in Kansas City, they had some vague grasp of what they were doing. And the Obama and Department of Education mindset, you can't suspend black students because they're victims of racism, is too patently absurd to even attempt to overcome.
That's the law.
But what's the line? Whom the gods would destroy, they first make mad. L.A.?
Somebody was about to make a comment.
Yeah, and I want to make a comment on that, too, when he's done.
So, Colin, do you have a comment?
No, I was just listening. I'm taking it all in.
Oh, okay.
Well, you know, I have identified and sat in the classroom, some schools for as long as a week, videotaping high-performing African-American schools, all black schools. One in South Central Los Angeles, Marcus Garvey. I've seen those schools graduate kids out of the 7th grade. They pass a college entrance exam and go right straight into college carrying 13 units and enter into contests with the white suburban schools in reading and math contests that they let the white suburban schools make up the questions, and they outperform. So I have seen these things. And why come that's not the model? Somebody mentioned Marva Collins earlier. Why come that can't be the model? No, public schools is not like that. Public schools is a bastion of experiments. We have a school here in St. Louis, which is a targeted school called Pomojas, an African-centered school. As soon as that school come about to be open, you have all these whites come out of the closet. Ratcliffe, Gary Orfield with the Harvard Project, which is nothing more about integration. And you have Martin Bloom and the same old soothsayers that have been around for decades that speak against what the parents want for their children. The program and the style of education which the state statutes allow, a curriculum can be whatever the local concern wants it to be, just so long as it meets state minimum standards. But no, people fight that. So there's a lot of blame to go around. A lot of blame.
Can I ask the recent commenter, do you know anything about Flip the Classroom?
Yes, I know about Flip the Classroom. I think I really appreciate it, especially at the upper grades. I think it's the present model of educating children, no matter who they are, is become so antiquated that it's got to change. Flip the Classroom is an excellent model where a child can take that information with them and study it when they feel appropriate, when time allows, and then they come back to the school and they discuss what it is that they learn. I think that's a good model.
I appreciate your reply. The problem truly is systemic. American education doesn't work. It hasn't worked for 50 years. It works in pockets where the people take it over, not the educators. But where the educators are allowed to do their experiment after experiment after experiment, all you end up with is a bucket of shit. L.A.?
Yeah, let me chime back into our guest here. In his book, like I said, the book I downloaded last night on my phone, Don't Make the Black Kids Angry. Now, here's the part of the title I want to hit home, at least from my point of view, particularly when it pertains to success of generational wealth. The hoax of black victimization and its enablers. I maybe jumbled a few words there. I believe, because from Facebook posts, YouTube videos, depending on who you're watching, friends, neighbors, relatives, there are quite too many for my taste. Okay, African Americans with a victim complex. Okay, and once it's psychological, from my point of view. If you buy into that hoax that you're a perpetual victim, you're going to self-sabotage yourself into some stuff that can morph into bad health, to losing your house, to God knows whatever. But if you take personal responsibility and, this show, for the people that know the history of the show, I had a squatter in my house, and when I was in victim mode, I was considering that person a squatter. But when I shifted my thinking to I called the person a Zen master. What can this Zen master teach me about what I need to do? Then things turned around. They eventually left, birthed this show, a clothing line. Now we got offline projects now. Because I decided I'm not going to be a victim. It's as simple as that. So, from my point of view, go ahead, Pierre.
L.A., the American schools, whites have produced schools that try to make people assimilate their culture. For blacks, it began at the Mohawk Convention, M-O-H-O-N-K, back in 1890 in Ulster County, New York, where they was trying to figure out what to do with the Negro problem. You had representatives from South America, Brazil in particular, also attended that conference. And what came out of that conference was nothing more than Brazil chose a different path. Well, Brazil chose to amalgamate the people in South America. In America, they chose segregation, de jure segregation, Jim Crow, and discrimination, and that's what you still see today. Blacks as a group, you got those in the middle, those on the left and the right. Those in the middle refer to be amongst themselves. But you got some neocons that would look at that, in particular whites and also some blacks, and say it's something wrong with that. It's something wrong with an all-black school. It's not the fact that the people that's attending the school is all black. The concern should be about whether they have the resources whereas they can be educated. And I have seen all black settings where the children are being educated. Try saying that to Nigerians. West African immigrate to the United States with the highest educational attainment, even more so than Asians who are ahead of whites and everybody else. So this notion that people have to assimilate into being out of what they are and being what somebody else is totally asinine, and it don't work.
Okay. Well, Colin, you cite many examples of, you can even cite some here. Let's talk about the enablers. Could you give some examples of enablers that contribute to this victimization mindset? The victimization mindset.
Let's talk about the title of the book. The title of the book comes from Kansas City. It comes from the former mayor of Kansas City, now Congressman Emanuel Cleaver. So in Kansas City, there's a place called Country Club Plaza, a very nice entertainment district, movies, theaters, a park. There's a plaza there. So for a period of years, a couple times a month, large groups of black people were descending on the park, stopping traffic, destroying property, attacking people, defying police. This is all on video. I documented it. Finally, after a couple of years, one of the councilmen goes, let's have a curfew at the Country Club Plaza. So Emanuel Cleaver was back in town just by accident, so they were interviewing him. They stuck a microphone in his face, and they said, well, what about this violence at the plaza? Should we put a curfew on it? He said, no, all that's going to do is make the black kids angry. And so the people who, L.A., what you're saying on your show, that is subversive. To ask people to take responsibility for their own lives, that's like the most subversive thing you could say in this country today, because it's so antithetical to what kids are learning in school. Every day they learn they're not responsible. Other people are responsible. White racism is responsible. So you're saying that's not true. You're a revolutionary, whether you know it or not. You're a dangerous revolutionary. And so we have all these people enabling all this crazy behavior, and all you're doing is asking the same thing I'm asking, which is, well, what about personal behavior? What's this group think? Does this group think help you get a job? No, of course it doesn't. Does getting skills, taking personal responsibility, expecting other people to take responsibility, is that what's going to get you ahead? That's the only thing that's going to get you ahead. And to the degree you reject that, that is to the degree that you're not going to achieve, LA, your goal of intergenerational wealth.
Right. Well, we've got some tools on here through, I guess, partnerships or collegeships. Peter, People's Law Study Group. Because one of the things in my personal experience, through that housejacking, swatting thing, I landed in jail 3 times. And like the first court, 4 or 5 years ago. And I had to come to the realization, because it was a black judge, it was a black squad, and I'm black. So what was I doing wrong? Okay, if I played that victim game, matter of fact, the victim mindset, probably I placed myself in that position. So essentially, once I had the paradigm shift to take responsibility, things changed. Part of that was, and I think I've mentioned this on this podcast a few times, when I enrolled in law school, was like the first week, I realized that it wasn't racism or white supremacy that was plaguing black folks. Now, this is my opinion. It was, and we've said this many times on this podcast, if you don't know your rights, you don't have any rights. So essentially, you have to take personal responsibility to know your rights, respect all that, because other than that, you can blame, but in the blaming, you don't get much mileage out of blaming. You can get arrested by the police, and I'll give you a good example. The late Sandra Bland. Okay, Sandra Bland got arrested. She was in jail that weekend. She couldn't raise bond money. But when she died, then all of a sudden you got a whole bunch of people that have her back. But she's dead. Okay? A lot of people had Mike Brown's back, but he was gone. A lot of people had Eric Gardner's back, but he's in the graveyard. So the best way, if you want to have people to have your back, take responsibility, get rid of the victim mindset. Absolutely everybody, several times in their lifetime, every culture, looking at the history, man, has been shit on.
Well, you know what they need,
and turn it around.
You know what's needed? You need to have the people law study topics in schools, because the common person in Ferguson and many other areas, they always they start off as writing letters against something that goes on. It begins with telephone calls against something that goes on. It begins as peaceful protest against something that goes on. Then it starts into violence. So the people that's being affected by this, and really the people are at fault, because there's no way in the world that you got a community that's 80% black and 100% of the police officers are white, 100% of the fire department is white. That's crazy. It should be the other way around. But if these people don't know that, because they're not being taught this, and the only logical place that they can be taught is where they spend the majority of the time of their day being taught is in public schools, then who's to blame? You can't expect somebody to know something that they never was taught. If you're on a plane, the pilot kills over on the floor, are you going to sit in the seat and fly the plane? No, you never was taught how to do that.
That is exactly spot on and correct. Think of an environment where you sit a group of 8-year-old boys and girls in a classroom, and you walk them through the Declaration of Independence clause by clause, phrase by phrase. Their brains aren't all full of crap like the high school and the college kids are. They have not yet been victimized by public education, and they will absorb it like a sponge. And then you go to the Constitution. U.S. Constitution is not a complicated document. 3 branches of government. It explains what each one does and how it does it. And over the course of a year, you could do 2/3 of a semester on the Declaration of Independence, and you can do the next third and the second semester on the Constitution. And now you've got a classroom full of 8-year-olds who are about to go into summer to become 9-year-olds, and they have a relatively firm grounding in the American legal system. And that, like LA's program, would also be a revolutionary act. To put it in its opposite, as Jay Leno said, the government has announced that they're going to show the Iraqi government the United States Constitution. Well, they might as well give them the Constitution, because America no longer uses it anymore. L.A.?
Thank you. Colin, promote all of your books and how we can get a hold of them in your YouTube channel again. Like people, I'm reading, I just downloaded it like late last night, his book, Don't Make Black Kids Angry. But it's a good read. I haven't read the whole thing. I just got it a few hours ago. But Colin, how can we name your books and how can we get them?
My books are easy to find. The easiest way to get them is on Amazon. It's really the only book out there that really takes on the whole black victimization hoax, the greatest lie of our lifetime. With again, all the stuff we're hearing on this show, I'm just going to tell you from our callers, that is not anything like what you would read in my book. Not one word. I don't do the theories. I don't talk about the Constitution, giving it to Iraq. No, I'm just saying this happened here. And here's how somebody denied it. Violence, denial, violence, denial, violence, denial. I mean, we're talking about very serious business, people getting hurt. We're not talking about retinkering with some kind of really, really complicated Rube Goldberg machine, and that's how we're going to fix all this thing. No, we're documenting how everything to do with racial violence, black criminality, black and white crime is way worse than anybody's saying. We're exposing that. We're not really arguing with people. We're exposing the people who are saying that, that's saying that this isn't even happening. There's so much going on out there. So much going on out there. Oh, by the way, I got a big
give us the name of the titles of the books again.
The book's called Don't Make the Black. I got a bunch of books. Don't Make the Black Kids Angry. Right. White Girl Bleed a Lot. Then I have a book on the knockout game. Got a couple other books out there. I had a chapter. You're talking about squatting? Okay.
Right.
I got a chapter on squatting, and it has to do with people called the Moors, a Moorish nation. It's an offshoot of kind of a Muslim offshoot. It's a black thing, where they say that because of a treaty in 1788, black people in America, the Moors, are not bound by laws of the United States of America. So they don't have to have a driver's licenses. They don't have to register their cars. They don't have to, they can squat in houses by making their own liens. It's one of these things that once you hear about it a lot. You talk to property officials, county recorders all over the country, and they're saying this is like a major nuisance. Happened. I mean, in my little town of Wilmington, Delaware, it's like happened a couple dozen times in the last year. And by the way, the cops do have a choice. When people are squatting, I mean, they can just go in and grab them by the scruff of the neck and say, get the heck out of here, you're under arrest. Or they can do what you were talking about, which is, they're probably renters, so let's start the eviction process that's going to take 6 months to a year. And then if they file a complaint saying the faucet's not working, then all that, the clock is reset. So people are gaming the system. The squatting thing it's not really like the biggest problem in the world. But I just try to cobble all these things together to show that there's some really lots of things having to do with black and white people and Asian people in this country are really, really kind of going crazy on us, and not enough people are paying attention.
Well, it sounds to me like what you have further exposed is that all blacks are not the same. They're different. They don't share, all of them don't necessarily share the same social experiences. They don't think alike. And, of course, the word black has evolved. Looking at the history of it, has evolved a long, luxurious journey to the point to where it is today. And, that's the reality you live with.
Well, Pianki, I agree with you. Not all blacks, because I'm big into distinctions, because when you say black, there are different distinctions of black. When you talk about North America, you got African Americans, you got Nigerians, you got Ethiopians, you got Somalians, you got people from Trinidad, Jamaica, what have you. Colin, let me ask you this: in your writings and in your YouTube channels, when it comes to so-called blacks, what distinctions of blacks are you talking about? Mostly African Americans, or is it a combination of different subgroups within that term?
There's biracial. It used to be called mulattoes. That would be interesting. What's your answer to that question?
Okay, so here, I did not create the racial paradigm in this country. I did not create the racial paradigm of black colleges, black churches, black music, black funeral homes, black labor unions, black police officers unions. This is a very long list. I'm reporting on it. I'm reporting on the enormous damage it does So don't come at me and go, well, Colin, there's a million different distinctions that you're not aware of. Of course I'm aware of them. But I'm also aware of this, that there is an enormous amount of groupthink, collectivism among black people that is doing an enormous amount of damage to them. There's an enormous amount of black people who ignore, deny, excuse, condone, and even lie about criminal behavior that exists on epic scale in this country that, I document all day long, every day.
Well, it needs to be a book parallel, which needs to be a book parallel with yours, Colin, because you mentioned churches. Richard Allen, the AME Church, he had to form his own because the whites didn't want to give him a charter. You talk about labor unions. Blacks tried to be in white labor unions, but they wasn't allowed, so they had to form their own.
No, you know what? I'm all down with that. 100%, especially the labor union thing. And so here's my question. And so, 80 years ago, the labor unions, people forget how explicit they were. Like, we're going to have this labor union to keep black people out of this trade. Very explicit. So I don't see why 80 years later, labor unions get a free pass. Everybody's sitting holding hands at the Democratic National Convention singing, "We shall overcome," with the same people who are basically doing the same thing today. So maybe you can help me understand that.
Well, it's very difficult. Just like the exposure of Pelosi's memo, as it applies to them infiltrating basically or supporting from behind but leading Black Lives Matter movement. So many of these things are continuing. They're very complicated. In Milwaukee, there's a book, and I don't want to take anything from yours, called Not Yet Free at Last, where they talk about the efforts of having school choice in Milwaukee. And in that effort, in black communities, it was a rule that was tantamount to being a law that the number of black teachers in that school building that's located in 100% black community could be no more than blacks' representation in the whole state. So it's things like that that causes one thing, which causes another thing, then causes another thing, as your book is referencing.
Here's the thing. Here's the question I asked. 2 weeks ago, a large group of black people broke into her house in Augusta, Georgia. They broke her arms, broke her fingers, robbed her, came back 2 hours later and set her on fire. So I want to know why that happened. And I don't want to hear anything about what happened 80 years ago, 100 years ago. I want to know what's happening today. And I don't want to hear any excuses from something that happened 10, 20, 50, or in Milwaukee. It's like there's an enormous amount of black criminality, black and white crime, enormous number of people way too eager to excuse, deny, ignore, condone, encourage, even lie about it. I mean, people are living in denial, deceit, illusion, and that's what I document in my books.
Let me comment on that, Colin, and callers and listeners. From our point of view, and you have it in the book I'm reading now, a lot of people are, the criminality part is enabled. They are, using my example, when I was squatting on, that woman, she was violating me, committing crimes. I knew I was being violated, but I didn't know anything about torts now. Now I know how to define it. Okay. But the thing is, oh, Jesus, all right. Can you guys still hear me? Somebody try to.
Yeah, I can hear you.
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay. All right, great. Come on, people trying to call me during the podcast. Anyway, so, but she was rewarded by essentially abusing the system so she can continue. I mean, she got 3 years of free living out of me. She was rewarded for being a criminal. So a lot of times serious. I mean, I can name about 5 or 10 crimes of this one individual that happened to me. I just couldn't. I can define it now, but I couldn't define it then. But she was rewarded by a judge with free rent. And now let's look at the bigger picture of this. Yeah, Carl.
Here's the drill. And we see this all over the country, that black criminality is now, black criminals are not looked upon as criminals. They're looked upon as victims of white racism. directed to the Baltimore riots last year when they were given space to destroy. So, and courtroom after courtroom, city council after city council, the criminals are more popular than the law. The lawbreakers are more popular than the citizens or the cops. And so black criminal, it's like everything now, everybody's a victim of white racism. Everybody gets a pass, including your tenants. Seeing us so much all over the country.
That's the exact word, Colin. A lot of people in every at least urban jurisdiction, in family court and let's go with landlord-tenant court just alone. A lot of people, a lot of criminals are getting a pass right now as we have this conversation.
But L.A., but there's a lot of truth to the point because the DOJ have came into Ferguson and found and revealed where that is true, where it is white racism. You have had, look at the Cook County, Illinois, where you had the prosecutor office had that office pool contest where they would march in black suspects, weigh them on the scale, and whichever prosecutor tallied up 4,000 pounds first before the 30-day period of the month ran out, they won the office pool, and it was infamously called nigger by the pound. It was one of the reasons they called Governor Ryan to go through the ramification that he did when he commuted all the death row sentences, because after he found that out. So there is truth with white racism causing what we see today as being black victimization. It's all over the place. You got to recognize it. And Colin, you're being unjust not to say. I agree with a lot of things you say. But it has to be recognized.
Okay, yeah. In the last 6 months, we've had two major studies done on police departments, Baltimore and Chicago. They could have been written by the same person. One was written by the Mayor's Commission, the other was written by the DOJ. They said, yeah, we know what's wrong with Baltimore. We know what's wrong with Chicago. We know why the criminality there is so wildly out of proportion because of white racist cops. You talked about that Ferguson thing. The Ferguson DOJ report talked about white racism. That was the greatest bait and switch in the history of our country. For 8 months, a year, all we heard about was the Ferguson, white racism in Ferguson. That's what killed Michael. That's what killed Michael Brown. It's all white racism. Okay, so the DOJ was the third or fourth group to come out and go, oh yeah, well that was a good shoot. But let me tell you what's really wrong in Ferguson. Those cops give out too many traffic tickets. It's like, what? I thought we were talking about people getting killed. All of a sudden, we're talking about traffic tickets. And a year later, we get a guy on the radio show going, yeah, the DOJ proved it. The cops are giving out too many traffic tickets to black people. This is crazy.
Well, it wasn't just traffic ticket. If you make an illegal left turn, fine. But when the cop walks around your car and see that you got mixed max tires, when the cops say that this tire in the front has got is suffering from inflation, the cops look at your rearview mirror and say it's crooked. When the cop looks at your tail light lens and say that it's got a crack in it, all those add up to more fines. That is ignorant. And as I said before, Mr. Colin, a black community that's 80% black should not have 100% white police officers due to the fact that the chief is white and he's hiring them based on the good old boy system. Where Darren Wilson came from before. Well, wait a minute, I listen to why you talk. Why Darren Wilson came from before he came to Ferguson, he came from Jennings. And Jennings, the population is black, 100% white police department. They complain. Jennings finally dissolved his police department. And where Darren Wilson ultimately came from, Crestwood, Missouri, you don't see no blacks in majority, even minuscule, the way you see it in these ring districts around the city of St. Louis, which is normally all black. It's a problem.
Well, all right, let me comment on this with the Ferguson thing, okay, with the, because I'm in the stats, okay. As one of our callers on here quite frequently says, you have to have a vested interest in the system. So in a city that's 70% black, how many black folks got together a little local political action committee and bankrolled who they wanted to be in power as the police chief, who bankrolled the mayor's office, who bankrolled the city council office, who bankrolled legislation? If you don't participate in the system, you get what you get.
Well, you're absolutely right. And that would be more prominent if the people in Ferguson was working on the public service jobs that they, in fact, pay for but they have to get on the bus and in what has been labeled ghetto vehicles and drive by these agencies where you got whites in them that's earning middle class wages and salary, benefits, and pensions. They don't live in the community. When they retire, they take those pensions back out into their enclaves and they spend them out there. It's a problem. Even not saying that if you had apportionate representation on the police department as it applies to the population that it serves, mostly blacks, we're talking about an economic condition here. If you had black police officers and firemen that lived in that community, they could take care of their property. They would be able to pay for their children's education, especially athletic fees, equipment, and so on and so on. They wouldn't be having to stand on the red light intersection with pots, pans, and buckets and helmets begging for money for uniforms and athletic fees. So it makes a lot of sense, but it's not being sensibly applied.
Can I say something?
Okay.
Am I still in queue?
Sure. Yeah, you're in queue.
It goes back to what Obama said when he was running for office. He was talking about revamping the whole system, and that's really what really needs to take place. And again, these things are not going to be overnight because there's a lot of problems. When Bush was in office, he closed a lot of doors on a lot of grants. There's a lot of money floating around that's not going anywhere, and there's a lot of people that's filling their coffers with, this municipal money also. But, a lot of people will vote somebody in office and go back to sleep, and that's part of the problem also. Nobody is forcing anybody or forcing anybody to be accountable. And that's really what it is. Even in our own community, you see somebody's child doing wrong, like when I was coming up, I'm in my 50s. If I was down the street and I did something I had no business doing, I get my ass whipped by some lady sitting on the porch that I probably didn't know before I got home and got beat by my mom. But nowadays, if somebody sees somebody's child doing something wrong and they say something to that child, they'll go tell their mother, and their mother come down the street and get that lady the business. So it's all about accountability, on all fronts. This is a big picture, and each intricate part is a major issue. That's what it is. It's cancer every damn thing. But if we don't get our own league, just like the Jews, they have an aggressive campaign. If you say anything about them, they got 3 or 4 lawyers that will come knock on your door, and either you say an apology or you're going to be sued. We need to do these things too. Black Wall Street. It was perfect. It was perfect. Education system was fine because who taught the children? Going back to Marva Collins. That's all. That's the only thing that really needs to take place. Once people make people accountable, once you reach these children who are out of order, it's going to be the one thing or the other. You're going to straighten up or you're going to be dealt with. That's all I want to say.
All right, thank you for that comment. Let me, because we need to wrap this up. Going back to Colin, the hoax of victimization and the people or organization that enable. I look at it this way. I can't be responsible for anybody else but me. Okay. So me personally, as a black man, I do not buy into, I refuse to be a victim. I refuse to be a victim. I got this take lemons and turn them into lemonade, and nobody can do that but me. Who's ever going to be president of the United States, they're not responsible for it. Whoever gets elected mayor, they're not responsible for it. Praying to Jesus sounds nice, or Allah sounds nice, but ultimately, I've got to do it. So, that term hoax, victimization, it comes down to your mindset. I don't buy into it. Anyway, Colin, I'll let you promote what you need to promote, and you can have the last word.
I'm not worried about promoting stuff. I'm enjoying listening to all the people on the line. Because when you talk about it, this whole victimization thing is so pervasive, and we're seeing that in the callers, and we don't see it from the host. But I'll tell you what, the things that you're saying are so subversive and so revolutionary. You ought to write a book about this. You ought to write a book.
Oh, well, I had to get somebody to do. I have to delegate out talking into. I think I'll call you on that. But for instance, when we talked about this, because we talked about a lot of solutions, but like the what's disturbing to me is like Corinne Gaines, young woman, only 23 years old. I'm looking at it as self-responsibility. Hey, that's crazy me. All right, well, like I said, Colin Flaherty. I'm reading one of his books now. He's got other books there on Amazon. He has a YouTube channel. I would suggest subscribe to that. Colin, anything to wrap it up before we get out of here for the day?
No, happy
thank
to be
you for
here.
coming on, because I called you last minute.
Happy to be here.
Okay, well, look.
And hope we do it again.
We definitely will. And I'll call you on that book thing. I've been called some names.
You should. You should write a book. It's a.
I've been called some
like,
names
tell
by people that look like me. What are you saying, Colin?
Yeah, I'm just going to say, tell people. Don't wait for the excuses. You got to get to skills. Take responsibility for your own lives. Because guess what? Every time you turn somewhere, there's somebody going to give you an excuse, especially black people in schools. It's like, oh, no, we got the Mohawk Conference of 1892. That's what caused everything. And they look at you and go, okay, well, it sounds good. Then they go out and conk somebody over the head and kill them. So this whole thing of personal responsibility, I mean, without excuses, that's the most powerful revolutionary message of the day. So I hope you turn into the Che Guevara of personal responsibility.
I've complained all along that L.A. Davis is one of the most dangerous black